Now, I'm not going to go into this chart in great detail, but one of the things I learned on the way is it really isn't easy to develop a new family of probability distributions. A lot of people have tried and done so over the years. Normally, what people do is they start with some base distribution, which might be the normal or the logistic or the student t, and then they modify some form of that distribution in some way. For example, Mead, that was measuring the diameter of carrot roots. He started with a normal distribution and he did a transformation of that distribution, a logit transformation, in order to get the logit normal distribution, which he found was a better way to measure the probability distribution over diameters of carrot roots. How are you going to modify the parameters? He used transformation, but you could also add another parameter to a distribution. You could raise it to a power, for example. You could substitute parameters. How do you select a distribution once you have it? You could try to match moments, match natural bounds. How do you estimate the parameters? You can do it by method of moments, maximum likelihood, all the way down to quantile parameterized, which is what I like as a practitioner, because you parameterize just directly based on the data. But you don't need to memorize this chart, but in fact, you wouldn't want to, but if you happen to be inspired by this lecture and you go home tonight and think you decide you want to invent a new probability distribution, this chart's probably a pretty good place to start. Anyway, the Pearson distributions have that path through the table. The Metalog distributions are, we're modifying the quantile function instead of the density function. I'll show you what this is in a second, but it's an entirely different approach from what Pearson used, except that I and Pearson both believe in parameter substitution as a good modification method, and I'll show you that. And we also use transformation for the Metalogs also. But anyway, that's a little bit of the background now. Now I've gone through that chart. There are a lot of literature references there you can forget about if you don't wish to be a probability distribution designer, if you just want to take ones that are already designed, like what I'm showing today. The design choices, what you choose through that table, are going to depend a lot on what your objectives are. For type tree distributions, the objectives are easy to fit to data, which the Pearson distributions are not. You want shape flexibility, where the Pearson distributions are pretty good in terms of that, because you can get up to 4 moments. You'd like choice of boundedness, so you don't get that with the Pearson distributions. And you want simple closed form equations that are easy to simulate. You don't get that with the Pearson distributions either. You do get it with quantile parameterized distributions, and you do get it in a much deeper and better and easier way with the Metalogs. We're in the early stages. If you say, well, why didn't I ever learn it? If these are so good, why didn't I ever learn about them in school? Well, unless you went to one of a very few universities in just the last 2 or 3 years, even the professors aren't aware of them. So that's why we're in very much of an early adopter stage. Having said that, and that's why we're teaching this. Having said that, I don't know of anybody that's adopted the Metalogs, very few, if anybody, who have actually adopted or tried them, gone back to the other way. And as Sam said, there's a lot of sort of low-hanging fruit besides just having a set of distributions. There's a lot of shape flexibility here. We'll talk about Bayesian updating in closed form. We'll talk about summing uncertainties in closed form as well for particular forms of Metalogs.